안녕하세요.
A light rain drizzled over Seoul, turning the streetlights into golden blurs, reflected on the wet asphalt. Han Soo-jin pulled her coat tighter around her body as she hurried toward the subway. It had been a long day, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and forget about the problems piling up like the city's relentless humidity. But fate had other plans. She turned the busy corner of Gangnam, and in the next instant, collided with someone. The papers she had been carrying scattered to the ground. Letting out a sigh, she was about to apologize when a familiar voice echoed in the air. "You." Time seemed to slow. Soo-jin lifted her gaze and met a pair of dark, intense eyes staring at her in disbelief. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. "Cha Min-ho," she murmured, his name slipping hesitantly from her lips. Min-ho, impeccably dressed in a gray suit, held a gaze that was difficult to decipher. There was surprise, but also something else, something deeper, buried beneath the years that had passed since they last saw each other. "It's been a while, Soo-jin," he said, his voice carrying an almost nostalgic tone. She blinked, trying to process what was happening. Years ago, Min-ho had meant everything to her, until, without explanation, he disappeared. No letters, no messages, no goodbyes. Just an emptiness she had never been able to fill. "Yes, a long time," she replied, kneeling to pick up the scattered papers. Min-ho crouched beside her, grabbing a sheet and glancing over it. "Still working in graphic design?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Soo-jin snatched the paper from his hands, avoiding his gaze. "Yes. And you? President of some company now?" He let out a faint smirk. "Something like that." She bit her lower lip. She didn't want to be affected, but his presence made her heart hammer against her chest. She wasn't sure if it was anger, longing, or just the weight of old memories crashing back all at once. "It was nice seeing you, Min-ho," she said, straightening up and shoving the papers into her bag. Before she could take a step, he gently grasped her wrist, not forcefully, just enough to stop her from leaving immediately. "Soo-jin," he hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Do you really think this meeting was just a coincidence?" She blinked, a shiver running down her spine. "What do you mean by that?" Min-ho slowly released her wrist, but his gaze remained locked onto hers, intense, filled with something she couldn't quite decipher. Maybe this is just the beginning. Soo-jin didn't know how to respond. Everything inside her told her to move on, but something deep within refused to let her dismiss this moment so easily. Fate, after all, was never that simple. Hours later, back home, Soo-jin still felt restless. Sitting on the edge of her couch, she held a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Her mind spun with thoughts she would rather avoid. Min-ho, the past, the memories that still haunted her. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table. The name on the screen made her stomach twist. "Min-ho, can we talk?" She stared at the message for long seconds, a whirlwind of emotions taking over her. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath before typing a response. "Soo-jin, I don't think that's a good idea." But before she could block his contact, another message arrived. "Min-ho, there are things you need to know about the past, about why I left." Her heart pounded hard. Her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitant. After all, some truths could change everything. The city of Seoul woke up, wrapped in a soft mist, as Han Soo-jin walked through the narrow corridor of her design agency. Her heart still felt heavy with Cha Min-ho's words from the night before. "There are things you need to know," words that echoed incessantly in her mind. Why, after all this time, did he suddenly want to explain? Her fingers drummed against the keyboard, but her focus was far from her work. The bright screens in front of her displayed unfinished graphics, yet her mind kept drifting back to Min-ho. For the 10th time that morning, she picked up her phone and stared at the screen, where his last unread message still lingered. "Min-ho, can we meet today? I promise I won't take much of your time." She sighed, torn between the anger of his abandonment and the curiosity about what he had to say. After all, years ago, he had vanished without a word. No messages, no goodbyes. And now, he wanted to talk, but did she even want to listen? "Soo-jin?" The voice of her colleague, Hiren, pulled her back to reality. Soo-jin blinked a few times, snapping out of her trance. Yes? What is it? Are you okay? You've been staring at that screen for minutes. Hyrin frowned, pulling up a chair beside her. I'm just distracted, Soo-jin replied hesitantly. Hyrin gave her a curious look and leaned in to glance at her phone. When she saw the name on the screen, her eyebrows shot up. Cha Min-ho? The Min-ho? Her tone was filled with surprise. Soo-jin looked away. Yes, he's back. After all this time, what does he want? He says he has something important to tell me. The uncertainty in Soo-jin's voice was evident. Hyrin crossed her arms, thoughtful. And are you going to meet him? Soo-jin took a deep breath, unsure. But something inside her, maybe the part that had never fully moved on from his departure, wanted answers. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated again. Min-ho, please, just hear me out. I'm at the cafe where we used to go. I'll be waiting. Soo-jin's heart clenched. That cafe. The place where they had spent so many afternoons together. Where they had laughed, argued, dreamed, and where everything had fallen apart when he left without a word. She closed her eyes for a moment before standing up. I think I will. I think I need to hear what he has to say. The cafe was nearly empty when Soo-jin stepped inside. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, bringing a bittersweet wave of nostalgia. Her eyes scanned the familiar space until they found Min-ho, sitting in the same corner they had always chosen. He looked different, more mature, but the intense gaze that had always unsettled her was still there. As she approached, he immediately stood up. You came. His voice was soft, but laden with emotion. Soo-jin sat down slowly, keeping her expression neutral. I want answers, Min-ho. What do you have to say? He took a deep breath, hesitating for a brief moment, but then, looking straight into her eyes, he finally spoke. I never wanted to leave, Soo-jin, but I had no choice. The confession hung between them, sending a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over Soo-jin. The past was no longer a closed chapter. Now, she had to decide if she was ready to reopen it. The cold night breeze swept through the streets of Seoul, carrying an air of unease for Han Soo-jin. She walked at a leisurely pace, absorbing every step toward her home, but her mind was still trapped in the conversation with Cha Min-ho. I never wanted to leave, but I had no choice. His words echoed in her head, sending her into a whirlwind of emotions she didn't know how to process. The next morning, the office buzzed with murmurs and fleeting glances as she arrived. Soo-jin never liked being the center of attention, but something about the atmosphere felt different. Feeling uneasy, she walked straight to her desk. Soo-jin. Hyrin hurried over, holding her phone with an alarmed expression. Have you seen this? Frowning, Soo-jin took the phone from her friend's hands. On the screen, a gossip site article displayed a photo of her and Min-ho sitting together at the cafe the night before. The bold headline read, Cha Min-ho, heir to HN Group, spotted with a mysterious ex-girlfriend. Could this be a romantic reunion? Soo-jin's heart pounded. What the? Her voice came out in a broken whisper. How did this happen? Hyrin crossed her arms and sighed. Someone must have recognized you. Min-ho isn't just anyone, Soo-jin. He's one of the most sought-after heirs in Korea. A wave of nausea hit Soo-jin. She didn't want this kind of attention. She didn't want to be a name in the tabloids. Her past with Min-ho was already complicated enough without the added weight of unwanted publicity. As if the day couldn't get any worse, her phone vibrated on the desk. Min-ho's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated but answered. Soo-jin, his voice was calm but filled with urgency. I saw the news. Are you okay? Not exactly, she admitted, biting her lip. What do we do now? There was a pause before Min-ho sighed. We need to meet. I never wanted you to get caught up in this. She closed her eyes for a moment. Everything was spinning out of control too quickly, but running away had never been an option for Soo-jin. Tell me where and when. Min-ho gave her a discreet location and then hung up. Soo-jin stared at the phone for a moment before setting it down on her desk. You really going? Hyrin asked, a mix of concern and curiosity in her tone. Soo-jin nodded, her resolve firm. I need answers, Hyrin, and maybe it's time to stop running from the past.
You're my eternal gloom, a rose that breaks the gloom. In your arms I'm home, can love